in the Nation on January 2nd, 2025, Philip Deary writes an article, President Biden should pardon Ethel Rosenberg. A newly released classified document shows that the National Security Agency knew Ethel Rosenberg was not a spy and that the government executed her anyway. Just was curious about your thoughts on this article, and if you think maybe this request for a pardon it even goes far enough.
Well, likely it does not go far enough, but I think we should back up and go to the heart of the matter, which is that Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were Jewish American communists who were accused of leaking what was said to be the secret of atomic weapons to the then Soviet Union. It's led to numerous books. I recall the one by Walter and Miriam Schneer, for example. I think both have now deceased. They did voluminous research and writing about the case. You might recall the U.S. novelist Dr. Gerald. He did a novel about the case, and it was actually turned into a very worthwhile film, as I recall. I think it was called Daniel, if I'm not mistaken. But in any case, they were executed in June 1953, and it caused worldwide uproar, not least in France, not least in Europe. I think the way to interpret this tragedy, this state-sponsored execution, is through the lens of politics. What I mean by that is that I think that the execution of the Rosenbergs was a shot over the bow at Jewish American radicals in particular. Because if you look at the history of radicalism and the history of the Communist Party in particular, you'll find that disproportionately Jewish Americans were involved. And this execution was a signal, a very unsubtle signal to this community about the price that could be paid if they did not clip their wings. I should also say that with regard to the so-called secret of atomic weapons, I recall, I believe it was in the 1970s, that the Progressive magazine in Madison, Wisconsin, published a design of an atomic weapon. There was no necessary secret of constructing an atomic weapon. The question is the material that one needs in order to construct such a weapon, not to mention a delivery vehicle, for example. So this case was fraudulent from A to Z. And I'm also happy to say that the Black left was heavily involved in the defense of the Rosenbergs. When Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were executed in June 1953, you had a mass rally in New York that was organized by William Patterson, the Black lawyer who I wrote a biography about, a close comrade of Paul Robeson. The children of the Rosenbergs, their parents obviously were executed and leaving them as orphans, that one of the first parties for the children, the two sons, was held at the Brooklyn home of W.E.B. Du Bois and Shirley Graham Du Bois, for example. And if I'm not mistaken, that's where they were first introduced to the couple that became their adoptive parents, the Mirapoles, who you may recall from their own notoriety with regard to the song associated by the chanteuse Billie Holiday, A Strange Fruit. The lyrics, of course, about this anti-lynching anthem was penned by Mr. Meeropol, whose his forename escapes me right now. So this case was a landmark. Understandably, it's attracted a lot of attention. And the least that can be done, it seems to me, is a posthumous pardon for Ethel Rosenberg. But obviously, we should not stop there.
Thank you for that reflection, Dr. Horne. and for that interesting history. I didn't know that about the Mirapols. Um, I know that as of a few years ago, I guess it was more than a few, probably about a decade ago, actually, by now. Um, One of the Mirapol brothers, orphaned brothers, was vying for a pardon for her mother, for his mother from the Obama administration.
Mm.
There's been an ongoing uh, uh, commitment, obviously, from the Mirapols and others. Maybe I can follow up with just a question about: is there an alternative to the pardon form that you could consider for something like this? Is there a way of posthumously exonerating someone like Ethel Rosenberg? I know that that's deeply problematic in the United States for various reasons, but can we expect the Biden administration to even heed the call in any regard?
The outgoing Biden administration, I don't have high hopes with regard to their doing the right thing. And a fortiori, as the lawyers say, that means that I don't have high hopes for the Trump administration coming in within a few days. But I don't think that that should necessarily deter us, because history shows that we can force the powers that be to change their minds with pressure. And hopefully, this article will serve to generate a fair amount of pressure. And I recall some years ago, and this is quite a long time ago, when I was living in New York, there was a Rosenberg's Defense Committee still. This was a few decades after their execution. And it would not surprise me if that committee was still in existence. And if it is, obviously we need to get behind their efforts.